Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. I hope you're all well. I am conscious that I record 10 interviews every single week at the moment, and I keep filling your podcast feeds every single day. But I just wanted to take my foot off the gas, stop, and say thank you for listening. And can you believe that we're approaching 6 years of me talking into your ears every day? In a non-creepy way. So much has changed in those 6 years. And today I have Stijn Christiaens coming onto the podcast, who has an incredibly cool job title at a company called Collibra. And that job title is Chief Data Citizen. I mean, how cool is that? I think that's up there with tech evangelist. But I am curious, what is the coolest job title that you have come across? As always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. But today, we're going to discuss how Collibra is getting data and policies ready for a cloud-native world, and making sure that the company complies with the growing privacy regulations, protecting data assets, and much more. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Belgium, where Stijn, our Chief Data Citizen, is waiting to speak with us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, definitely, Neil. Thanks for having me over. So I'm Stijn from Collibra, one of the founders of the company. That's now 13 years ago. And Collibra is seen as the data intelligence company. We help organizations by delivering accurate, trusted data for every user and across every data source. And my role in the company is Chief Data Citizen. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. But over those years, as a founder, I've worn a lot of hats. You know, in the beginning, we were 4, and you sort of do everything that is necessary in a startup. So I've done pre-sales, post-sales, partnerships, products, marketplace, research, and education. And that's given me a very unique opportunity to see this data intelligence space evolve from those different perspectives. And we've been, like I said, we've been doing this for 13 years. So we've got over 500 organizations worldwide. We've been around the block.
Love that. And you do have one of the coolest job titles I've ever heard. I thought technology evangelist was a good one, but Chief Data Citizen. Can you tell me more about the story behind that title and what the role entails too?
Of course. And thanks for finding it a cool title. If anything, it's definitely a unique one. I think what we wanted to do, we wanted to make a bit of a statement because we care so much about what we call the data citizen. Which is anybody who uses data to do their job. We believe that's all of us these days. We're all united by data at work as well as at home, I would say. Now, I said it before, right? We were 4 when we started. We're currently over 800 and counting. So as the company grows, you have to grow alongside with it, alongside with the business, with the needs. And with me having all of those hats prior, we thought it was time to sit down and figure out, okay, what do I best do next? Our company was growing, systems, process becomes a lot more important. Data, of course, follows suit. And we believed it was time for us to say, okay, let's set up our own data office where we can do, Collibra for Collibra, if you will. And that's how the data office started. Which means the first thing I had to do as a chief data citizen was figure out, okay, what does our overall data strategy look like? And for us, that's 3 parts. It's the infrastructure, using that infrastructure, the lake, the data platform to build data products, which is Chief Data Officer version 4, according to Gartner. And in doing all of that, using our own products and practices. So that means being our own best customer. And that means as we eat our own dog food, that's on Monday mornings. On Friday evenings, we call it drinking our own champagne. But as you do that, you're also learning things about your product, about your practice, and feeding that learning back into our product, but also into our customers and partners. And what we call this is Data Office 2025. What should a data office of the future look like? Because at Collibra, we like to be future looking, and that's what we encourage our customers to do as well. So in a way, chief data citizen is sort of the same as saying chief data officer, if you will. But we have this, just like you said, external evangelist component to it, because we're trying to, let's say, raise the awareness of data in the world at large. I help support other data leaders with what we've learned, which is sort of why we said, okay, let's make a statement and call it the chief data citizen.
Yeah, and I was chatting to a guest recently who said that every business, no matter what the size of that business is going to have more data tomorrow than they have today. And I think that's so true. And we've also got machine learning and artificial intelligence trying to make sense of all this data. But of course, the most important thing is the data is clean. And so can you expand on why that most important priority for this year for any business is increasing and maintaining the quality of the data?
Absolutely. And it's a priority this year for a lot of organizations, and my gut feel tells me that this will continue next year and a few years past. Here's my reasoning on it. I think at Collibra ourselves, we've seen it, but over the past year, we as well as any other organization, we've spent a lot of our resources in 2020 getting our businesses to be digital first, which means, okay, you have to update your business processes. But maybe you're also servicing your customers differently. Maybe you're putting data products out there. And the thing with those is that it's garbage in, garbage out. So, the outcome of your product, the user experience, any smart features you may have concocted, they all depend on the quality of the data that feeds them. Recently, there was an article by Andrew Ngun in Forbes where he called data the food of AI. And I think it's clearly shown that the higher quality data you feed into such a model, the better outcomes will be. So in short, organizations turning digital, the data products, making AI widgets, turning on IoT devices, it's all more data. So inevitably, the quality of that data, of that asset becomes important. And I think a second one that's really big is the whole cloud migration. Everybody these days, 5 years ago, we were all trying to move stuff into Hadoop clusters, which were mysterious beasts with pink elephants, and now it's all about the cloud. And the thing is, if you're cleaning up your attic, right, your on-premise legacy attic, and then you're saying, okay, we're going to clean it up and put it all in storage or what have you into the cloud, obviously you're going to find out that some of these pieces on your attic are a bit dirty, right? So you're thinking, okay, maybe I should clean it before I move it into the cloud. So I think these trends that are happening now make it so that data quality just is becoming top of mind for many organizations.
And you in your own company, that you're putting smart data quality controls in various places, aren't you? Can you expand on that just to help people listening understand how it could work in their world as well and the approach that you're taking? Of
course. So you remember one part of my strategy was the data infrastructure, right? The data lake. And that's necessary because a data product cannot work without it. So, whether you call it a data lake as an implementation of a data platform or something else, you have that infrastructure, you have the data product. And then you have sources of data that feed data into the lake. The data gets picked up there, it gets processed somehow, it gets moved along a network of pipelines. Maybe it's consumed in a warehouse or on some pretty dashboard or in an automated model. But every one of those handover points can introduce new data quality issues. Maybe there's data missing, maybe the schema's changing, maybe the timeliness is out of date, the relevance, the accuracy. There's a whole bunch of controls that could be going wrong. So what we're doing is putting those controls in place on those points, the source system, the start of the pipeline, the end of the pipeline, important gates all across the lake. And these controls, essentially, you're measuring, hey, what's the state of my quality here as best as you can? And that gives you a view and ideally over time, a trend line of the quality. And if you combine that with assigned responsibilities in the business, then, if the temperature of the data goes beyond a certain point and the data is determined to be of bad quality for its use, then the business, the person, the people with the relevant responsibilities can be notified and take action. And this is not a challenge that's unique to us inside our data office at Collibra. When I speak to other CEOs, other data leaders, this is all very similar situations that they are also in. So it's also top of mind for them.
Yeah, I would suspect that there'll be many business leaders listening all over the world that know they need to do something, but probably feel a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of data and where it's coming from and how to join it all together. So are there any tips you could offer on how to plan executive data priorities for the rest of the year and beyond? Because it does feel overwhelming for a lot of people on where to start, doesn't it?
And sometimes I feel that the whole technology landscape isn't helping. It seems, it changes so frequently. There's more tools and new technologies and practices out there. So as an organization, you're still trying to digest what was hot 5 years ago in a way. So it is confusing sometimes. But what I would say, what we focused on and what I can recommend for others is, again, the digital 2020 forced a lot of people into digital acceleration. So for us, priorities are around getting our data and our policies ready for that cloud native world, as well as making sure we comply with growing privacy regulations. There's, GDPR in 2016 was sort of the grandmother of them all, but now there's close to 150 of those out there. So it's really still growing. And next to that, also protecting those data assets. So if I summarize this, it means you're taking the slogan, hey, data is an asset, and you're taking that further into execution, driving that home into the business, just like you're doing with your money assets or your talent asset or your IT assets. Data is only as valuable as the connection to people, algorithms, insights, and outcomes. So if the business makes decisions based on the data and takes actions based on that data, that's when you're achieving the outcomes for the organization.
Well, I was going to say that with more data comes more responsibility, and the EU's recent announcement to take control around AI has ruffled a few feathers. But I believe that this proposed legislation will actually strengthen AI and investment and innovation right across the EU. So can you expand on that? Because it's great to hear some positive news in this field at the moment.
Of course, and I think I just heard a Peter Parker joke there. More great power, great responsibility, right? I love that quote, by the way. The EU is indeed, Europe is, as usual, taking the lead in regulation, you know that. And I'm happy to see they're doing this for controls around AI as well, just like they did with privacy and GDPR. And of course, GDPR regulation is never perfect. So there's a lot of criticisms on it, but ultimately, over time, it will go in the right direction. And the same thing is going to happen with artificial intelligence. If I read that regulation that's in the works correctly, it has two big aims. One is promote AI, but also to protect the public. And that makes a lot of sense. Because AI is here to stay, that's clear. It can give us a lot of benefits, but there's never value without risk. So as a people, as countries, as sovereignties, we have to make sure that our consumers and our citizens, that the rights and the freedoms remain safeguarded. So I believe that this proposed legislation will guarantee that safety and fundamental rights of people and businesses, while also strengthening the uptake, investment, and innovation in AI. And the story I sometimes like to tell about the things that AI can do is a very short one, and is based on some research work by Sandy Penton out of MIT. And essentially, with just a limited amount of data that you and I would think, well, that's pretty innocent, right? But if you have the data about which your number, your telephone number, which other numbers it's calling, from which geographical location and how long, if you have that pattern of data, which seems very innocent, right? It's which websites are you visiting on a daily basis and how long are you staying there? But if you have that pattern of data for a couple of months, that becomes a unique behavioral pattern about yourself. And smart data scientists can take that data and turn it into what they call features, And then they can figure out, okay, but you're calling from your home, or you're calling from your work, or you're calling on the way to work, because the pattern of behavior is always the same, and it's Monday to Friday, and then it's in the weekend. So they can turn the features into features again, into features. And ultimately, they could even say something with high accuracy about, for example, your emotional or psychological state. Now, if then people would use that to deny you a loan or other things, then you wouldn't like that. So people are not aware that so many things can be derived very accurately from so little data. So that's why we have to raise the awareness, but we also have to put the protections into place. And AI is now behind so many of the services we use. It's not just the loan approval, it's also the premium you get quoted for your insurance, the news you ingest. And that's where the challenge lies. Like, where is the transparency? Where is the accountability? Where is the responsibility? If those models run unchecked, if there's no controls put in place in organizations, if the data that drifts or the model output changes, how do you know that those shifts are happening? How do you know that the outcome, the changed outcome of such a model is affecting you or your customers, or maybe discriminating them? And I go here by some work by Professor Joanna Bryson. I don't think you can blame the robot. Yeah, the robot did the loan approval wrongly. That's not how it works. We don't blame our toasters, right? We look to the people that made the toaster or sold the toaster, and that same accountability for AI lies with the organizations that build them and put those systems out there. And I see a lot of similarities with the GDPR approach. It's principles-based and incorporating assessments. The fines are quite meaningful, and that forces organizations to put those controls in place, know where the data came from, understand the lineage, know the quality of the data, so put in place explainability around the models, and importantly, have the ability to report on those systems you're putting into place, how they're designed, how they're working, so that the public can see, okay, these organizations are doing things the right way. And that includes setting up boards and being able to do audits around those systems that you've put into place, which, by the way, is a good practice. Because if you look at the research that's ongoing now around AI explainability and fairness, etc., there's a big body of research happening. The one thing that they always recommend is set up diversity in the team. If you only have men building a model that will recommend products for women, then a lot of women are going to frown their eyebrows and say, what shitty recommendations are these, right? But if you have a diverse team, and ideally, for example, an ethics board also with a lot of diversity, you can essentially avoid a lot of those facepalm and worse situations.
Well, if I was to ask you to look into your virtual crystal ball at the road ahead, what do you think the future of hybrid cloud and multi-cloud looks like? Because again, there's more challenges and opportunities there, isn't there?
Absolutely. This is only just getting started.
Yeah.
Now, from our professor, we're a spin-off from the university, I always learned legacy is always here to stay, right? So legacy is not going away, but clearly cloud is dominating a lot of growth for the next couple of years, which makes sense because you don't set up your own water station or electricity mill or whatever. So the same thing is happening with the data centers. And I think the three big vendors, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're really capturing and commoditizing a lot of the data management industries. AWS was first. They have a head start. Google is catching up strongly. Microsoft was already everywhere with Windows and Office, etc. So you can see how if you're a larger organization, you're going to have a mixed situation of those large vendors plus your legacy, right? You'll always have that kind of hybrid multi-cloud situation, especially in large organizations. And I think one of the interesting developments is the Gaia initiative in Europe. We'll see how that evolves. And a little bit down the line is, but that's probably a topic for definitely another time, is the whole Web3, which is happening right now based on crypto technology. So I think in the cloud, you'll see a lot of developments, but mainstream expect that the next let's say 3 to 5 years, a lot of movement in data analytics will be happening into the cloud.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today, but before I do let you go, there's a question I always like to ask my guests, is if there was a particular song or piece of music that has inspired them throughout their career. And then we add that list, add that song to the Spotify playlist we got here. I'm going to be curious if you choose a data-related song or if you've got something else up your sleeve, but is there any particular song that springs to mind?
I was getting nervous. What do I say? Do I pick some classical music, maybe some Daft Punk or some Foo Fighters or some electronic music or Tool or what have you? But ultimately, I went for a personal choice. So I would go for Robin. That's Robin with a Y, and the name of the song is Monument. It's 8 or 9 minutes, so a lot of listening pleasure.
Love it. Great choice. I'll proudly add that. And before I let you go, could I just ask you to remind everyone listening of where they can find out more information about you guys, how you can help, or contact your team? What's the best starting point?
Well, personally, Stijn from Collibra, that's STAN, so Collibra.com, and then Stijn at Collibra.com. You can always follow my personal Twitter and LinkedIn as well. And like I said, our website, Collibra.com, is full of materials, and I can strongly recommend university.collibra.com, which is a freely available resource where everything for the past, let's say, 7 years, everything we've learned and are learning, we're translating, we're putting a lot of investment in it to translate that into recorded, freely available courses.
Excellent. Well, there's so much focus at the moment about superior and unique customer experiences, but of course the data products is all a product of data and garbage in, garbage out. So if the outcomes of the product, the user experience and the smart features all essentially depend on the quality of the data that feeds into them. And such valuable advice that you've offered today, but more than anything, just thanks for joining me on the podcast, Stijn.
Thanks for having me over. It was fun talking. Hope we can connect again. And in the meantime, stay healthy. Bye-bye.
So a big thank you to Stijn for taking the time to come on here today, share why he's changed his job title, what it means, apart from it being the coolest job title around, and why Collibra is putting smart data quality controls in various places. And also, of course, for talking about the EU's recent announcement to take control around AI and how the proposed legislation will strengthen AI investment and innovation across the EU. I've got a feeling that's going to be something we're going to be hearing more and more about in the coming months and years. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk if you would like to work with me. Other than that, I'll return again tomorrow with another guest. So thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.